Hello, my name is Sam Feltham and welcome to Expert Interviews here on Smash the Fat. It's not our usual day for interviews, it's Sunday. I'm kind of wearing my nice cozy warm jumper and the heating's on full whack on a Sunday evening, but we just had to fit this interview in because it's with an amazing man who is not only a high school teacher, but he's also the world record holder for running the furthest distance possible on an athletics track in 12 hours at 101.61 miles, which is absolutely phenomenal. It's ultra footwear athlete Zach Bitter. How you doing, Zach?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, Sam.
It's my absolute pleasure. It's fantastic to actually get some of your time, which I'm sure is very precious with kind of the tight training regime that you have to have as a high school teacher and a professional athlete at the same time. I don't know how on earth you fit those in. But before we kind of get into all the nuts and bolts of kind of your training regime and how you do exactly run 100 miles in under 12 hours, let's start off with, how you got into running and where you are today.
All right, yeah. So I guess I got started running at a fairly early age. I think I got introduced to the sport in middle school when one of my Phi Ed teachers had us doing a presidential physical fitness challenge, which included a 1 mile run, and I started to realize that I could either get beat pretty handily in the 100-meter dash, or I could do quite well in distances of like a mile or further. So naturally, being middle school age boy, I wanted to win if I could, so I kind of started gravitating towards distance running, and that kind of carried out throughout high school. I ran fairly competitively in high school, and then also at the University of Stevens Point in college for cross country and track. And I guess as I continue to kind of experiment with the sport and try different things out and really get to know like what it takes to like run different distances and things like that, I would realize that I tended to get a little better or more competitive as the distances got longer. So when I finished college and started teaching, I started thinking about doing some ultra marathons, and in 2010 I did my first 50-mile race on a trail here in Wisconsin, and I guess that was when I got officially bit by the ultra bug, and been doing them ever since. And I ran, I think, somewhere like 24 or 25 ultras now, so it's a bit of addiction.
Yeah, for sure. It does become very addictive kind of exercise, and especially kind of when you start to specialize in a sport and you just want to try and master it more and more as time goes by. So kind of when did you start to really realize, okay, I can start to kind of, really break into this and start making it kind of, almost a full-time hobby, which is, by the sounds of things, what you kind of do?
I guess in 2011 I ran a pretty decent road 50-miler, which ended up being the fastest 50-mile time in the United States, and I wasn't too sure what that meant at the time because there really isn't a whole lot of road 50-milers in the U.S. So it definitely wasn't the best 50-miler of the year, but it was the fastest time, and I started thinking, if I specialize in certain environments and stuff, maybe I could really make a push and be decent at ultramarathon running. And I guess in 2012 was kind of a year where I had quite a bit of success. I had won 4 ultramarathons, including the 50-mile U.S. Road Championships, and I was able to run and complete my first 100-miler. And then that was also actually the first year where I raced kind of year-round, I guess I would say. But in 2013 is when I guess I really started to get excited about what I could potentially be capable of when I ran at the Desert Solstice with that 12-hour world record and 100-mile American record.
As well, yeah, and that's kind of just the amazing thing. So just for folks that know exactly kind of what that means, basically it was a 24-hour race, but you ran 12 hours of it around the track, was it?
Yes.
And then kind of, so the 100-mile record, so you ran 100 miles in, I think it was like 11 hours 47 minutes. I think it was, and you broke the American record for that, and then obviously you kept on running up until 12 hours to break the furthest distance within 12 hours. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. A couple guys here in the States, Nick and Jamil Curry, they're two of the top-notch race directors we have. They put on a race every December called the Desert Solstice, 100-mile, 24-hour track championships. And it works out kind of nice that they let you kind of pick a distance or a time you want to shoot for. So there's a variety of people out there doing typically things from 100 kilometers up to 24 hours.
Wow, extreme. And you just went for the 12-hour, and you nailed like over 100 miles in that 12 hours.
Yeah, it was actually kind of funny because I went in there thinking I could maybe get under the 100-mile American record, and I didn't really have even an idea of the 12-hour world record until around mile 90 when the race director told me that like if I keep going at a steady pace, I should be able to get that one as well, which was timed nicely on his part because I could have used a kick in the pants at about mile 90. It gave me a little extra motivation.
Yeah. I think I'd start kind of, dwindling at about mile 9, let alone 90. But, for all the folks that are watching and listening this, how on earth do you go about running 100 miles? Not only just 100 miles in itself, it's around a track as well, so it's the same thing again and again and again. What was that like during the 12 hours?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and one thing I guess I keep learning throughout ultramarathon training and racing is that like specificity is huge. So like if I'm going to race in the mountains, then I better be running in the mountains, or if I'm going to race on a flat concrete or track or something like that, I better get my body used to that environment, and that's going to play a huge role both mentally and physically. And I think for me, I spend a great deal of time running on the roads and doing track workouts and things like that. So for me, that's a pretty comfortable environment. So just knowing that was there is reassuring. It is very monotonous though on the track, and it's almost a different sport on the track when you're doing that as opposed to the trails or the roads. Mm-hmm. But really, my mindset was just to try to break it into smaller blocks and kind of try to figure out like what milestone should I hit now, and like look forward to specific things like I'll do 10 laps and then I'll grab that water bottle. So I'm not thinking of the fact that I was going to be out there all day, but I was just thinking of a smaller set of goals at the time. And then also near the end, I would start to do things like try to picture myself on like an 8-mile route that I would do back at home that I knew like every stick, stone, and pebble along the way, and just visualize myself on that route as opposed to going around and route on the track, and that seemed to help a bit too.
Yeah, a bit of externalization is probably a big thing in that environment. Because when I was 21, I walked from Land's End to John O'Groats, which is the length of Britain. So it's 1,000 miles. It took me 2 months to do it, and kind of during that time, it was kind of similar to what you were saying there. You kind of break it down into more smaller, manageable chunks. So you kind of end up, I was walking about a marathon a day, and I'd kind of, you'd look at a corner and say, all right, that's the first bit, and then, you'd look at the next corner or the next like big tree or landmark, which could be a church or it could be a hill or something like that, and you just kind of aim for that, and then just after a while, you start to really dig deep into the actual main goal, which in your case was 100 miles in a 12-hour sitting, which is insane. Like on my walk, that would have taken me 4 days, let alone 12 hours, which is absolutely incredible. So for everybody listening and watching again, what does it take in terms of training for that? Because people would think, you're going to be running every single day, or every single hour of every single day, and also that you're going to have to be eating copious amounts of rice and pasta as well. So, kind of, what was your training like in the lead up to breaking this world record?
So I follow a relatively high mileage approach to training, and it really does vary from person to person how they go about something like this. But for me, I do a lot better when I have a lot of that that aerobic base build up. So I'll do anything from 100 to 150 miles a week on average leading up to the race or in the months before the race. For Desert Solstice, it actually was a little interesting because my goal race that fall was actually a 50-miler, and I ended up doing another 50-miler after that, and then Desert Solstice kind of on a whim, more or less. So my training wasn't necessarily catered towards Desert Solstice for the track race. It was more just kind of preparing for ultramarathons in general. And for me, that was, like I was saying before, a lot of high mileage, typically a weekly long run of 20-plus miles. During the school year, a lot of two-a-days. Usually I would do some form of threshold or tempo type effort or progression run. One workout that I feel really helped me that season was a long run coupled with a progression run where I would run for, say, like 15 miles or so, and then the next 5 miles I would just gradually work my way down to like a mile pace of around 5:15, 5:20, just to gradually get down and test my leg speed over a distance when I knew they were already a little bit fatigued. And I feel that one made me a lot stronger mentally and physically. I'll do other things like some more intensity training, like anything for even 400-meter repeats, where I'll be going at a pretty quick effort of between 70-75 seconds per lap.
Wow.
Just trying to get that real fast turnover, and I feel like that's really beneficial in ultra marathoning. Not necessarily because I'll ever be going that fast in the race, but what I found is when you do what I would call like over speed training, or a speed that gets you going really fast outside of what you feel comfortable with, that makes the more, I guess, relatively casual pace you're going to do in like a 100-mile race seem a little more comfortable, and also help you keep your form, because you've learned to be comfortable in like when you're out of control. So then when you're in control, you tend to be able to hold form and stay consistent.
As well, yeah. So it's a real good kind of mix of obviously kind of building up the endurance in your legs, which you build up over many years as well. People kind of have to realise that building up that kind of endurance takes years to do, and then kind of just the final touches could be those kind of higher intensity sessions, kind of build up your speed and things like that, I suppose. And also, as I was saying before, a lot of people that are not in this whole world of ultra marathon running and diet and nutrition as well, they first off think, you're eating, bowls of pasta every single night. So what's kind of your diet like in the run up to this kind of thing, and during the actual race as well?
Yeah, so my diet, I feel, is one of the things that's really helped me kind of move up to the next level with ultra marathon running. And I follow a relatively high-fat diet approach compared to your average person, and certainly compared to your average endurance athlete. I follow a program called Optimized Fat Metabolism, and basically what it does is it tries to reshift your body to recognize fat as primary fuel source, and then you are able to use carbohydrates strategically depending on what your lifestyle is like. So for me, my lifestyle is quite unique in the amount of training I do, so I can probably get away with a little more carbohydrate than, say, someone who's sitting around doing nothing. They're sitting around at a desk all day long and then maybe training like 3 times a week or something like that. With that said, though, it's still a really low amount of carbohydrate. When I'm in my peak training, when I'm going really hard, doing strength training, speed work, long runs, and averaging over 120 miles a week, I'm still probably in a range of around 20% carbohydrate intake. And those will be I usually try to time those real specifically. So like if I'm going to do a really fast effort, like those 400-meter repeats where I might need a little extra boost, I'll have a few sweet potatoes or something at night before that workout. But other than that, it's a lot of fat, a lot of coconut oil, a lot of like bacon. I like organ meats for recovery purposes, so like fresh calf liver is a big go-to for me. I do a lot of coconut milk as well. some nuts and nut butters, extra virgin olive oils, eggs, fatty cuts of meat, things like that are pretty typical on a daily basis for me.
Fantastic. And then during the actual race, for instance, during your world record, what was kind of your approach to liquids and food as well?
Yeah, so for me, it's my view kind of is that when I'm training in a fat adapted state and I guess living in a fat adapted state, what I'm basically doing is allowing my body to rely much heavier upon body fat stores during an event than what I would otherwise if I trained on high carbohydrate. So I'll take in between 100 to 200 calories an hour during a race like Desert Solstice. And I usually what I'll take in is some carb, maybe a little fat, sometimes no fat while I'm running, because I'm assuming that even at my leanest, there's enough body fat there that I can rely on that and not have to risk like ingesting food, which can cause problems with digestion when you're running and things like that. So at Desert Solstice, my main fuel source was actually this organic banana chip that's cooked in coconut oil. My thought process there was I was running relatively slow enough that I was still burning primarily fat as my fuel, and the coconut oil is an MCT oil, so I thought it would be a pretty good fuel source for while I was on the move. And then the banana would give a little bit of carb to trickle in there for just a little bit of carbohydrate during the race, but not much. To kind of put that in perspective, before I was a high-fat athlete, I would eat between 300 to 400 calories of basically pure sugar during a race per hour, whereas now the carbohydrates per hour are about 100, sometimes a little more than that. So I've been able to reduce it significantly. I'm trying to remember what I drank at Desert Solstice. I think I used a little bit of like a sports drink or Mountain Dew or something like that. Just very little amount, just trickled it in, again, keeping it between like that 100 to 200 calorie per hour rate. But yeah, that's kind of how it went. I know like my crew there and some of the people around were just waiting for me to blow up because they were wondering why I was just eating just banana chips and,
and like, oh my God, he's gonna die.
Right, they thought it was going to be a disaster, I think, the last 20 miles, but the fat adaptation is huge. You can really do a lot on very little when you're in that type of a state.
Absolutely. And just kind of to explain it to anybody that isn't kind of attuned to this, basically you can kind of store about 2,000 calories worth of carbs on the average person in your muscles and your liver as carbohydrates. But for instance, on a lean individual like myself, around about 12% body fat at 90 kilos, 200 pounds, I'm carrying around about 100,000 calories worth of fat, basically. And if you can essentially access that fat for energy during an endurance race or any kind of sport, then you open up the possibilities of being able to go longer without having to constantly feed yourself on basic glucose, and just being able to energize yourself off of your body fat. Is that kind of the thinking that you're following here?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of reasons that benefits you outside of just the simple, like, which fuel tank would I want to go with type of mentality. For one, they've done some studies with the Western States 100 and other races where they're looking at like the amount of oxidative stress that one puts on their body doing a race like that, and it's significantly less on someone who is fueling on fat on a regular basis as opposed to someone who's taking in lots and lots of carbohydrates. For me personally, I've noticed that the inflammation that I would occur from the training and racing has gone down a ton with the fat, as opposed to the higher carb approach, which has allowed quicker recovery times and better sleep and things from that nature too. But yeah, it's definitely a huge thing where like you have everyone, even the leanest athletes out there have way more calories of body fat than they'd ever be able to get in glucose store. So to be able to tap that is a huge advantage.
Absolutely. I think Steve Finney kind of uses the analogy of a fuel truck, where, you know, they've got the actual fuel tank of the truck, and that's kind of the carbohydrate stores, but you've actually got the massive fuel tank on the back, which is, you know, hundreds of thousands of litres of fuel, and it's like you're just not able to access that fuel tank that's on the back. But if you are able to access that, then you can just keep on going and going and going and going. And this is kind of being put together in a really succinct, clear and concise and entertaining way in a recent documentary, which you do feature in, I think, on one of Steve Finney's talks that he has in the film, which is Serial Killers 2 as well. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity to see it yet, but it's absolutely fantastic, and it's out on March 1st. People can pre-order it via smashthefat.com/CK2. So have you had the opportunity to see that at all, Zach?
I haven't. I've heard that I was talked about in it, but other than that, I haven't had a chance to see it yet. But I'll definitely have to check it out when it comes out.
Absolutely, and it's really it's fantastically put together, and you are mentioned in there through one of Steve Finney's talks, and the faster study as well. Were you part of that faster study?
Yeah, yep, with Jeff Volek and Steve Finney for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of give the folks at home a bit of an overview of that study, what exactly were they looking at during that?
So what they ultimately did was they took a group of high-fat athletes and a group of high-carbohydrate athletes, and they were able to pick and kind of filter in and out athletes based on reports we'd fill out about what we're eating on a daily basis, and they had some parameters put down where, like, if you were within this range of fat percentage to carbohydrate percentage, you could qualify in one or the two categories. And what they did is they had us come out there, and they took a bunch of tests from, like, blood, muscle, fat biopsies, and ultimately the goal was to get us on a treadmill for 3 hours and collect a bunch of data on our rates of fat metabolization as opposed to carb metabolization. And they based our paces and stuff off of the O2 max test that they did the day before, so that everyone would be in about that same relative intensity level of 65% of your VO2 max. So yeah, and Jeff Volek and Steve Finney are currently have their results being reviewed by or getting reviewed right now. But the data has been kind of trickling out as to what the results of the faster study have shown, and what it has shown is that we basically rewritten textbooks in the sense that the amount of, like, grams of fat per minute an athlete can metabolize at their VO2 max is incredibly higher than what they thought it was. I think most textbooks would have, like, the top person on the graph could maybe metabolize 1 gram of fat per minute, whereas myself on that test, I think I metabolized like 1.56 grams of fat per minute, and I wasn't even the highest. There was guys who did more, like closer to 1.7 on that too. So basically what it says, I think, is that a lot of our previous studies and scientific experiments were likely done well, but they were just done on groups of people that were eating a more traditional high-carb diet, and we just didn't have any data on athletes really that were doing high-fat stuff other than some stuff that Stephen Finney had done with cyclists in the 80s. But some of that stuff's coming out now, and I think there's going to be some follow-up studies to the faster study as well. So it's really exciting to kind of see it all play out and unfold.
It is fantastic to see, and hopefully that'll kind of, you know, totally change things in terms of, you know, how we approach nutrition, particularly for endurance races as well, and hopefully that'll kind of trickle down throughout all of the athletic programs in all the schools in all the world, and then, you know, we can kind of approach this in a slightly different way and kind of more geared towards real food as well, which is what it always tends to be as well. And also something I think is kind of important as well is footwear, which is kind of something that I've played around with over the kind of past 5 years. Not that I'm an ultramarathon runner at any rate, but I do occasionally do the odd bit of running. Used to be on the using Asics, kind of, big heels and everything like that. But you yourself wear Ultra shoes, which are all about zero drop in their sole. So try and explain about your current footwear and why you wear this.
Yeah, so I've always been kind of a bit of a data geek, or kind of someone who's really like to dig into like the different studies and things. So just like with diet, I also wanted to look into footwear and kind of find out like what would work best. And a lot of the stuff I looked at were pointing to footwear that had like a zero drop, or that allowed your foot to make a more natural stride. So I eventually gravitated toward Ultra footwear because they make a shoe that not only is zero drop, but also has a bigger foot or toe box on their foot, so your toes can actually spread out a lot more and kind of regain that full range of motion. And then like the other thing I was looking for is I like to do things from the trail to the track to the road to the mountains and all kinds of stuff, so I needed a shoe that would be able to kind of go through all that stuff. And Ultra footwear, they make a variety of models that can take it to the track or up in the mountains, as well as low profile shoes or max cushion shoes, all with that same philosophy of zero drop and wide toe box stayed in place. And for me that's important because I train on a lot of unnatural environments like pavement and stuff like that, so sometimes depending on what I'm trying to do I need a little extra cushion in there, but I don't want to sacrifice that zero drop or that low heel to toe ratio in order to get that little bit of extra cushion for recovery days. And with Ultra footwear, I'm able to kind of maintain that.
That's fantastic. And then how about your strike as well? Are you kind of fore, mid, or heel striking?
I definitely am a 4-foot or mid to 4-foot striker. I think I've always been pretty consistently a mid-foot to 4-foot striker. What running in zero drop has allowed me to do is consistently do that to the point where I'd be able to do enough training runs in a real low profile shoe, which has allowed me to really strengthen my lower legs. One thing I've noticed since I'm running an Ultra footwear is when I go to the lower profile shoe, it allows those foot muscles to really flex and get worked well and get a lot stronger, to the point where I can run in basically a track flat for 100 miles and not get injured. And it's a process getting it that way, especially if you're accustomed to running in a more traditional model shoe, which has a really big heel to toe ratio or a lot of cushion, and you do that all the time. Working down to that lower drop, and then making sure you do some running in a real low profile shoe as well, I think is huge in keeping that overall strength and stability in your feet.
That's fantastic to hear, because over the past kind of 5 years, I transitioned from that big heel to kind of, as you say, that big drop that you get in many traditional trainers and sneakers, to a complete zero drop and almost actually barefoot. So I use a shoe company called Vivo Barefoot myself, and kind of similar to Ultra in that you've got that big toe box there where your toes can actually splay out properly. And the one thing that you do really notice is the development in your lower legs, especially kind of when you get into running that mid 4-foot strike as well, is the development in your lower leg and also kind of in your feet as well. As you do make that transition, you start to feel your feet kind of just a lot more stronger, and you can actually kind of feel the proprioception in the ankles as well. Is that kind of something similar that you had during maybe your transition?
Yeah, definitely. I remember just when I started, you would notice the biggest telltale sign is you start having muscle soreness in areas you didn't even know there were muscles there. And you start to realize, like, oh, I must have been neglecting that muscle for however long because it's getting sore after doing something with that wasn't a whole bunch different than what I had before. So noticing that kind of go there, and then those get stronger and stronger, you can definitely tell there's a change in that lower leg muscle structure, and I think that's translated big into balance and things as well. allowing those muscles to flex out and then spread those toes out and stuff has allowed me to be a lot more agile, I think, while running downhill and other things like that.
That's fantastic. And so what's kind of next after you break a world record of 100 miles? What's next for Zach Bitter?
So this year I've got some interesting plans. I was able to race in the 100K World Championships last year for Team USA, and I finished 6th place, so I locked up my spot for next year. So I'll definitely be looking to compete on that team again. I'd like to try to break the 100-mile world record as well, which is at 11 hours and 28 minutes, and I think I can, if I have a good day, that's definitely within reach.
Yeah.
And then the other race I kind of have on the schedule that I'm eyeing up is the Badwater 135 that I'm hoping to get into this year and try out some extreme weather racing through the heat of the Badwater 135.
That sounds hardcore, the score, Zach, and very inspiring. It's absolutely incredible when people do these things. I mean, we had Sami Jinkinen, who did the Fat Chance Row on about a few months ago, and it's incredible hearing his story about going through all this bad weather, almost getting capsized in the row and stuff like this. Stuff that you do, and this is kind of on a weekly basis that you have to kind of keep up these miles and stay on the training, but I'm sure you kind of enjoy it at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I think I look forward to training all the time and pretty much every day, and you just, after years and years of, you get really in tune with your body too, and it'll tell you, especially when you're dialed in nutritionally, it'll tell you like when you need to rest and when you can go hard and stuff like that. And getting to that point is nice, because then there's not a whole lot of guesswork involved.
Absolutely, and then you kind of you can follow your instinct there without kind of looking at all the data and things like that. Although it's always a good idea to try and keep an eye on that sort of thing, isn't it? But kind of when you get to your kind of level, then you can kind of be more intuitive, perhaps.
Yeah, but like you said, the data's a lot of fun, and it can tell a lot of stories as well, so it's always fun to collect that too.
Yeah, at the same time. Fantastic, Zach. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's greatly appreciated. Are you going for a run this afternoon?
I did run this morning, but I am heading out again this afternoon, so I'll try to catch the last bit of sunlight tonight and get a few more miles in.
Nice, man, nice. And there's only one more thing to do before you go and we wrap things up properly, and that's to hear a smash it out from Zach Bitter. So on the count of 3, I want you to shout smash it out to the camera. So 1, 2, 3.
Smash it out.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about. So people can check out your website and blog at zachbittercoaching.com. Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually just zachbitter.com right now. I'm kind of shifting some stuff around on there, but they'll get to it if they just type in zachbitter.com.
Perfect. And then they can kind of check out your blog there, as well as if anybody out there is thinking about kind of taking it to the next level in terms of ultramarathon running. You do coaching as well, and that can kind of be done online anywhere in the world.
Yep, that's right.
Perfect. People definitely go follow Zach on Twitter as well, at ZBitter, because it's just fascinating kind of seeing like everything that you're doing and like all the little bits and bobs and stuff. So definitely go check that out. And are there any other wise words that you want to leave us with before you have to go, Zach?
Just fat is your fuel.
Yeah, man, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, and on that note, people can check out Serial Killers 2 Run on Fat, which features Zach briefly at smashthefat.com/CK2. Comes out March 1st. Make sure you pre-order it and you get a little bit of a discount on that. Thanks again for your time today, Zach. It's greatly appreciated. And we'll hopefully kind of get you on in the future when you break the 100-mile record at 11 hours and 27 minutes.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me on. It was a blast, and I look forward to coming on again.
Fantastic, Zach. Thanks, mate. See you soon.